fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
What's up, Salt Strong Nation? Joe Simons, like diamonds. We are back. Got a crew here talking about red tide. We're talking about a lot of issues going on with Tampa and Tampa Water Keeper dudes. Adam, Dustin, Justin, and Luke. Guys, what's up, man?
How's it going, guys? Thanks for having us.
I've heard a lot of great things about you guys. You've been mentioned in some podcasts before of people who donate to you guys. And I'll be honest, like I've looked at it, I've been inspired by it, and it wasn't until a lot of this red tide stuff got serious where I see you guys just everywhere, and I was like, all right, we've got to get you on the podcast. And I want to hear the story about, like, I mean, you guys have sacrificed a lot of your time. I mean, we're doing this late at night with some beverages here, just to kind of fit this in. And you guys have sacrificed a ton. I know you especially. Dustin, I'm going to mix up that all night long, but being on the water is a guide. So I'd love to hear your story. Like, how did you guys get into this? And I mean, what is the organization all about? What's the story?
I'll let Adam go with that.
Sure. Well, Tampa Bay Water Keeper is a 501c3 nonprofit that was started by a gentleman by the name of Andy Hayslip, I believe about 4 years ago. And the organization ended up being absorbed by our sister organization, Suncoast Water Keeper, at some point. And then last fall, the gentleman on the board of Suncoast Water Keeper, which is mainly the Bradenton, Sarasota area, Rusty Chinnis, Joe McClash, Justin Bloom, who's our environmental attorney, who serves on both boards. They started to reform the Tampa Bay Water Keeper board. So I had served on the Sarasota Baywatch board with Rusty when I was still living down in the Bradenton, Sarasota area. That's where I'm originally from. And he called me up and said, hey, listen, the board is being reformed. We're trying to make it its own standalone board again. Would you be interested? And I said, well, listen, man, I'm a super busy trial attorney. I don't know if I'm going to have the time. Tell me about it. Because I want to know exactly what the goals are, what's happening, what the organization is actually doing. Because look, there's a lot of organizations out there doing a lot of great things, applying for grants like we do too, for oysters and clams and seagrass and all that stuff, which is phenomenal. That's great. But for me personally, I wanted, if I was going to put my time into something, outside of work and away from my family and everything, I wanted to make sure it was something that was being very proactive and aggressive. And when I found out that we had this amazing environmental attorney in Justin Bloom, who on behalf of Suncoast Water Keeper and Tampa Bay Water Keeper is filing lawsuits in federal court under the Clean Water Act and holding the cities and counties and corporations accountable for spills, sewage, and other pollution and runoff and all that stuff. That got me really excited because as an attorney, I'm a trial attorney by trade. And I was like, hey, that's pretty awesome. I like it. And I talked to Justin and found out exactly what was going on with these lawsuits and what the results were, which is essentially getting court orders forcing the cities and counties, corporations to be come into compliance with the DEP regulations and under the Clean Water Act. And that really excited me. And I said, you know what? This is a really awesome organization. I want to be involved. So from there, we started gathering other board members, and we have a phenomenal crew of board members that are all mostly in our 30s and 40s. So, there's a good young group of people who are very passionate about the water and about fishing and boating and making sure that we have that same water that we all grew up with, guys, for our kids. And I got 2 young kids who love to fish and love to be out on the boat. And it breaks my heart to see what's going on with the state of our bay, And when I originally got involved, I had no idea. Who could have guessed we'd be where we are today? Right. So along the way, I became acquainted with Captain Dustin Pack, who's a fly fishing guide here in Tampa, and I'll let him talk more about that. But I thought he would be a phenomenal addition to the board because he's very passionate about the environment and had been for a long time. And he had some involvement with Tampa Bay Water Keeper early on, organizing the fly fishing film tour event, which was a huge success. That was a couple years ago, and raised a lot of money for Tampa Bay Water Keeper. So got to know Dustin, and fortunately he joined up with our board. So that's kind of the story about how I got involved, and I'll kick it over to Dustin from there.
So I was born in Fort Myers and then moved here when I was 4. And so lived here basically my whole life, 32 years now. And so basically early on in my life, fishing, I wasn't super environmentally not smart, but I wasn't going after like I am now. I'm going after environmental crisis and helping. And that kind of happened whenever I got married to my wife. My wife was very environmentally friendly, and that kind of developed over time. I started guiding, and then I kind of saw myself as like an environmentalist, conservationist that happens to be a fishing guide. I've said it before. And then I worked with Andy when he was in charge of Water Keeper a few years ago when we did the film tour. And that was before I was a member, before I even thought about becoming a board member. Then over time, then Andy left, and then it got revamped, and me and Adam met through mutual friends. And it just happened to be that, they wanted me on the board, and kind of like a person with eyes on the water, pretty much. Just what am I seeing out there? How do you feel about it? That's basically kind of what I bring to the table. These guys are on the board. They're guys and girls are insanely smart. A lot of law backgrounds and stuff. I'm the fishing side, obviously. So I try to bring to the board what I can. And I'm very passionate about this estuary. I have been for a long time now. And at first it was, I live off the hill near the Hillsborough River, and just north of downtown. And a lot of it was plastic pollution in the river. That's really what bothered me big time, because we have a horrible problem with runoffs after rains and stuff, with storm drains, and not to get too far into that. And then I thought that was a huge issue, and it is a huge issue. And then this comes along, what we're dealing with now, and now that doesn't seem like such a big deal anymore. And it still is, but for this, what we're dealing with now, just tenfold over that issue. And so I'm happy to be part of the board, and I'm happy to help. And this time, our board, like Adam said, our board's fairly young formed. So we're getting hit with a pretty big issue right off the bat for the most part. But we're ready, and we're dealing with it as day by day, the best we can.
It sounds like you've been here for most of your life, you said, in Tampa. Is this the worst in terms of a crisis, you think?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
in 30 years.
Yeah, easily. I think one of them equates it to a kill back in the 70s, 71, I think, when the Bay was, a lot of people may not know, but Tampa Bay was kind of like a dead zone in the 70s and 80s. Yeah. And it's come back, tenfold from where it was. But by far the worst fish kill. People want to say that it happens every year, that we had one in 2017, 2018. It wasn't anything like this, not even remotely close.
Well, yeah, and the reality is, this is irrefutable. Listen, red tide is a naturally occurring organism, right? Crania brevis. It's been around forever, and I remember reading something that even dating back to the conquistadors, they would write about all these dead fish washed up on shore. So listen, it's a naturally occurring organism, of course, but we as humans have a profound effect on the level to which red tide thrives. Okay. And disclaimer, I'm not a scientist. Dustin's not a scientist. So take what we would say with a grain of salt. A lot of it's common sense, and a lot of it's known science. Okay. So red tide feeds off of nutrients that can occur naturally in the water. But also, when we as human beings put it back into the estuary, that's what causes these super blooms, right? So you have the two biggest offenders, nitrogen and phosphate or phosphorus. Again, I'm not a scientist, but those were the main nutrients that you see. Those are the main nutrients you see in fertilizer runoff, in sewage spills, and most notably Piney Point. And that's well documented, right? There's over about 200 million gallons of wastewater laden with these nutrients pumped into our estuary. So, yeah, is it the worst that I've personally ever seen? Absolutely. I mean, just look at the optics of it, all the photos we're seeing and all the tonnage of fish you're seeing in the news reports of, St. Pete and other municipalities taking out of the water right now. I'm trying to remember, the last one I saw was like 100 tons, Dustin. What was it? I mean,
no, 600 tons.
Oh, Jesus.
As we're recording this right now, when it comes out, it may be way surpassed that.
600 tons.
What was it 3 or 4 years ago when we had that till? Did you recall the amount of tonnage from that?
I think it was 1,800 pounds.
Was it?
I think so.
So, I saw a comment from Captain Scott Moore. I'm sure you guys are familiar with him. Legendary guide out of Bradenton, Anna Maria. Literally wrote the book on live bait snook fishing. He made a comment, and of course he's been fishing this area forever, that he's never seen red tide that popped up first in Tampa Bay and Upper Tampa Bay in that area, right? It always starts in Manatee, Sarasota County, and then kind of works its way in. And if I'm misquoting him, I apologize, but that's what I recall seeing. But it's very unusual. Let's land on that it's in Tampa Bay proper, rather than in Manatee, Sarasota County too. Whereas you are starting to see it pop up on the beaches in Sarasota County and Manatee County right now. Yeah. So this is, sometimes I don't even know what to say. Just seeing the photos and the drone footage of just piles and piles and piles of fish everywhere floating. And listen, every fish is important, but you're seeing tarpon dead, you're seeing grouper, you're seeing breeder redfish, you're seeing snook, you're seeing trout, flounder, you name the fish, they're floating. And we posted a picture on social media that was sent to us of a dolphin dead, So yeah, it's heavy. It's heavy.
So I looked it up. I was wrong. So I want to make sure I'm correct on this. So the entire state, 1,800 pounds was not right. It was 2,000. Maybe I saw 1,800 tons, but it was, what I'm seeing here is 2,000 tons for the entire state of Florida. So right now we have 600 tons just in Tampa Bay.
One day. Wow.
What?
Crazy.
Man. So that's what I saw.
And that's per the news outlets, of course.
2 to 3 weeks so far. Yeah.
What's that, Luke?
It's been like 2 to 3 weeks so far, just to have a perspective. It's going to be probably a week or so before this goes out.
Yeah. So we had, it just depends on how. So I've been out on the water documenting, taking pictures of these dead fish for about 6 weeks now. I started seeing them along Bayshore, probably, so it's early June, I think, maybe even end of May. A lot of catfish, saw some sea trout and stuff like that, have documented pictures. So we've been seeing this for about 6 weeks now, but they started cleaning up just 4 or 5 days ago. How much of that stuff left, how much of that stuff stayed. Elsa came, pushed a lot of that dead fish up into St. Pete. But yeah, so 600 tons just in Tampa Bay alone.
Wow. And I was reading too that maybe a lot of people don't know this, but there's 2 reasons that we're trying to clean up the dead fish, which is something that everyone can help out with if they're out there. Is one, obviously it smells and it's not a pretty sight, but 2, that actually builds on top of it, right? That's actually putting, as they decompose, more nutrients into the water and just continue this thing even further, is what I read earlier today. Man, it's just that's a crazy amount of dead fish. It's mind-boggling.
I don't even know that. I think the rough numbers right now is over 1.2, 1.3 million fish, rough estimate numbers.
Man.
You can't even wrap your brain around it.
Well, shoot the question back at you guys. Have you ever seen anything like this? I'm sure the answer is no as well, right? You guys have been fishing this area forever.
Yeah, no, I haven't. But my dad, I was born in Tampa, and so my dad was there in the 70s, and he told us about that. He's like, man, at one point Tampa was like a cesspool, and he's like, it kind of took hitting rock bottom before everyone, regardless of your political affiliation or anything else, even if you didn't even like fishing, you're just sick and tired of seeing dead fish in a bay that looked like crap. And said politicians got involved, municipalities got involved, and back then they had some different issues. I mean, now they're the same but different. And all of a sudden, it didn't happen overnight, but everyone got together and it cleaned up. I mean, now today we have more seagrass, at least as we're recording this, than Mosquito Lagoon, and they're way downhill for other various reasons. But it definitely recovered. But it ain't going to happen overnight, and it's certainly not going to happen at the rate we're going.
And Mother Nature is resilient. We've seen red tides before. We've seen some bounce back. And, I think I told you before we started recording, I grew up in the Bradenton, Sarasota area. We had a very bad red tide down there a couple of years ago. And Sarasota Bay was hit very, very hard. And it's been bouncing back pretty well. It's still not to where it should be, but we've had some very good fishing down there past couple months. So listen, optimistically, we hope and pray that we can bounce back from this. But the harsh reality is, the harsh assumption is that we're at the beginning of this, because we're not even at 90-degree water temperature yet in the bay. When you start getting a lack of oxygen in the water and die off, and et cetera, which only helps out the red tide to bloom. So we stay hopeful, but in the meantime, we have to focus on what we can do as citizens to bring about some change here.
And so before we get into that, because I mean, you guys see the same comments we do, and everyone kind of wants to blame someone, right? And I don't. And correct me if I'm wrong. I know you guys just did a meetup there in Tampa at 81 Bay Brewing there with Caps for Clean Water, but it sounded like this. I mean, the Piney Point thing clearly is part of the issue, but that wasn't the only issue, right? So can you guys, at least for the listeners who are just kind of confused, and I think everyone wants, in the lawyer terms, a smoking gun and just kind of someone to blame, like what's going on? Like, is there one entity to blame? Is there 3 entities, 10? Is it us? Is it humans? What are the causes besides the natural part of it?
Well, there's only so much that we can comment on, because, and a lot of people don't know this, but we, Tampa Bay Water Keeper, joined in with 4 other organizations as plaintiffs in a lawsuit on the Piney Point issue. Okay, and that lawsuit and the notice, which is a requirement to send out before you file the lawsuit, the notice sent out to the defendants in this particular case, they're posted on our website, tampabaywaterkeeper.org. And they're like, the respective documents, the notice and the lawsuit, they're like 70, 80 pages long. But it's pretty fascinating reading. And if you want to learn about what happened with Piney Point, how it all started, the entire history of it, I strongly, strongly recommend to your listeners and anybody watching this, go read it. Go read it, because you're going to learn a lot.
Where is it on your site?
If you go to, so again, www.tampabaywaterkeeper.org, and you go to our work, I believe, and legal cases.
Okay.
I believe it's still on the headline on the top.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you can click on that. But so there's links to both the notice and the lawsuit, and you'll see the defendants there. So the defendants include, HRK Holdings, which is the property owner of Piney Point that ran the site, Governor DeSantis, and before a lot of people, freak out that we're suing the governor, it's essentially suing the state. It's not the governor personally per se about anything he did or did not do. Although there may be some allegations in there to that, but again, I can't speak to the lawsuit all that much. But it's essentially suing the state of Florida for this mishap that has been going on for decades. The phosphogypsum stacks at Piney Point, these issues have been happening for decades. And again, I'll defer to the lawsuit and the notice that people can read to hear the entire history about it. But you can see how the can was kicked down the road with regard to Piney Point for, like I said, decades. So people are looking for somebody to blame. It's not only the Piney Point issue, okay, and Piney Point itself, although that's a very big part of it. But listen, just look at what we've been doing to the bay for for years and years and years. And Dustin and I started talking to Joe about this before we started recording. But what flies under the radar are all the sewage spills that happen almost on a yearly basis by our cities and counties due to poor infrastructure, that sort of thing. And if people just go online, so Joe, where do you live right now?
I'm in Winter Haven, so I'm dead in the center.
So maybe not so much Winter Haven, but Luke, I know you live over in St. Pete.
I was in Tampa, yeah.
Type into Google sewage spill St. Pete, and I challenge you to go through, the first 5 pages of Google and count how many news articles there are about tens of thousands of gallons, hundreds of thousands of gallons, millions of gallons of sewage that have been pumped into our bay, not only by St. Pete. If you live in Largo, type that in. Bradenton, type that in. There was 13 or 14 million gallons spilled by city of Bradenton into the Manatee River this past year. City of Lombo, there was a massive sewage spill in Sarasota Bay about a year ago, 2 years ago. Millions of gallons, and nobody even knew about it that it was happening. This was a busted pipe, right? Nobody knew about it until somebody discovered it. And it was going on for several days or a week. You just look back in our history of the bay, and you'll see it's rife with problems with spills and nutrients being pumped into the bay and just damage to our estuary. So if you're looking for somebody to blame, generally speaking, I'm not just talking about right now where we're dealing with right now, but this has been an issue for a long time, and that's why we're here. We were aboard here dealing with these issues before Piney Point. Right. So I challenge people to just stay aware. And of course, nobody really reads newspapers anymore in print, but, those types of stories would end up on page 3 or 4 or 5, and it would go under the radar. But these are major, major issues that have been happening for a long time. And that's why we are here, our board.
It's so frustrating because I think all of us, regardless of how long it's been going on, everyone wants to fix this now. But is there anything we can do today, or was this just we have to let this just play out throughout the summer?
That's good.
So as of right now, what we're trying to do is just bring attention to it. We're trying to get state help right now. We're trying to get the governor to talk about it. We're trying to get some kind of assistance in the short term, because like we talked about with all of the decaying fish, that's going to add to the nutrients in the water. So the fastest way to get all of those dead fish out of the water, the better. But we got to do that with funding. The county of St. Pete, Tampa, they don't have they do, but they don't have the funds to do all that. To the extent that it needs to happen. That's in the short term, really fast. Just this funding and talking about it, in my opinion, it needs to be number one right now.
I had a couple of our members who live in Tampa and semi-retired and have time and have boats. And they had asked me, and I wanted to ask you guys, because I honestly didn't know the answer. I think I do, but they said, is there any legal ramifications of going out there and picking up dead fish in their boat, even if it's, obviously Goliath grouper and things like that? Is there any, do you guys know?
Yeah, can't give legal advice, but I think that's a question for FWC. Because technically speaking, possession of a Goliath grouper is possession of a Goliath grouper until they say otherwise. You may recall years and years and years ago when we had that really bad freeze, they lifted the restriction on possessing snook, so people could go pick them up out of the water.
Yep.
And that was a short-term issue. But to my knowledge, they haven't done that yet. So I would caution people to be careful on that.
I know there's a big trash can, and I don't know if it's for people or citizens to do it, but there's a big trash can in the middle of Crisp Park right now. A big dump truck trash can. It says for fish only, right in the middle of Crisp Park.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, I saw that today. There's I think there's 5 of them now throughout a couple counties just lined up just to dump. That's what came about. So, okay.
There's a big one at Maximo. I was at Maximo the other day, and there's some shrimp. I guess they hired some shrimpers. There were a couple of shrimping boats that had they were bringing in tons at a time. It was so sad to see. And they had a big forklift that would take it from the boat up to that dumpster. But
And I think a lot of that funding needs to go towards, I mean, what I've heard is they need to hire these shrimp boats because they're going to be the fastest ones to be able to clean this stuff up. Yep. And I think they said they were running through $100,000 a day just in cleanup to the city of St. Pete alone.
Whoa.
So I know they're running thin.
They're moving a lot of stuff because I mean they have that big deck. I mean it was loaded. Obviously there's a lot of seagrass too because all that stuff piles up. But they were going through a lot of fish. And
well, yeah, and it begs the question: at what point does the state come in to provide funding? Because the argument being, like, listen, the state, they had their hand in this too, to a very large extent. So, and you ask what people can do in the short term as well. And listen, holding your hand out for money is always a difficult thing to do. But I ask people, don't just sit on your hands, like become involved. And one of the ways you can become involved without actually standing in the courthouse making the arguments, right, is help us help you, right, and be your voice. So we're one of the organizations amongst others in everybody's respective areas. Like I said, there's Suncoast Water Keeper for the Braden and Sarasota area. There's Tampa Bay Estuary Program. There's our organization, Tampa Bay Water Keeper. And listen, these lawsuits, they don't pay for themselves. All right. There's day-to-day costs involved in litigation, and I can speak to this because I am a trial attorney myself. I don't do the environmental law stuff, but being a part of this lawsuit on the Piney Point issue, it costs money, right? We have to pay for depositions, experts, day-to-day, just paper. There's hard costs associated with that the attorneys don't just necessarily front, right? So contributions to Tampa Bay Water Keeper really help out towards those litigation costs, which we as a plaintiff in the lawsuit are on the hook for. We got to pay for that. So that's why we're really trying to make a push for membership and people to donate, because that certainly goes toward our efforts towards holding these people accountable and these entities accountable that had a hand in all this. So if people would be willing to go to our website, tampabaywaterkeeper.org, and donate and become members, get yourself a cool hat and a Tampa Bay Water Keeper shirt along with your membership, we would greatly, greatly appreciate it. And hey, you can tell your friends, I'm a member of Tampa Bay Water Keeper, and I helped hold these entities accountable for what's going on. My contribution helped toward that, and that's the absolute truth. Okay. Dustin and I, we're not getting paid to do this. We're not getting paid to spend time. We're all volunteer. We're a volunteer board. Nobody gets paid. So any little bit helps toward our efforts in our lawsuits. And I say that plural because, listen, this isn't the only lawsuit we've been a part of. We recently had one against City of Largo, which resolved. There's another one against a company called Trademark Metals, and all that stuff is on our website. You can read all about it. So there's our organization. You're not just throwing your money away towards something. It's going towards a goal, and it's going towards action. And that's really important to understand. It's not just sitting in a coffer. It's going towards something. It's going towards holding these entities accountable.
Yeah. So Adam, I took up your challenge and I did the Google search, and you're right. It's like sad to see there's many different instances of millions of gallons of sewage that's emptying out. So what, and I know like down in Fort Lauderdale, like a lunker dog has been featured like last year. There's a lot of this similar type stuff where sewage is going out and causing a lot of trouble. What is the sequence of events to help stop that? Like, is it county based? Like I assume that's all going to be municipal stuff, right?
Are you referring to sewage spills?
Correct.
So, and this is my limited understanding of it, and that's probably a better question for Justin, our environmental attorney, who's actually litigating these cases. But my rudimentary understanding of it, there's one of those big words. Sorry, Joe. My basic understanding of it is that the infrastructure of these various counties and cities are so old or neglected and not maintained as well that you end up, especially after big rains and so on and so forth, with sewage overflow where they just have to dump it, right? Or you have leaks, busting pipes like you did in Lombok Key. That massive spill, which was right over by Coon Key, which is there in North Sarasota Bay over by Tidy Island. That is the kickstart. That's how it happens initially. But when we file these lawsuits under the Clean Water Act in federal court, there is, generally speaking, a lot of times a resolution, a mediated, negotiated resolution, where there is an agreement reached where the various counties, cities, whoever's on the hook here, agree to have an order entered that they will comply with certain guidelines and what they need to do to make the situation right. So instead of us sitting back here and saying, oh man, that's messed up, there's another 15 million gallons of sewage being pumped in there, hope somebody does something about it, we actually are. Okay. Our organization and others too, right? It's not just us filing lawsuits. There's other great organizations out there joining the fight. So that is a very rough sketch, Luke, of how those lawsuits go down and what happens.
Cool. Dustin, I want to ask you a question as a fishing guide. The last 2 trips that Luke and I went out on, we essentially canceled them, and we were out there filming. We're trying to make a living on the water and teaching people. And we were like, let's just go back to the house. Like it burns your eyes. It's not fun. And I don't know that it's necessarily a great thing for fishermen to be hardcore fishing when, the very few fish that are alive are struggling. What are your thoughts there as a guide, and what would you tell, a lot of our obviously audience is recreational anglers who, and they still want to go fish on the weekend. Should they take up bass fishing for a couple months or go somewhere else? What do you think?
So I'm way more of the environmentally friendly guy, and I'm all catch and release. I haven't kept a fish not an inshore fish in probably 6 or 7 years. So at this point, when I start seeing dead fish, in my opinion, I just start almost feeling bad for the fish. I don't even want to, if you start seeing, like say you go dock light fishing, you start seeing floating fish and you see 5 fish alive on a dock. I don't want to put a hook in those fish's face. Those fish are surviving. Those fish may be dead tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So once I start seeing these dead fish, I've had to cancel every trip. The next trip I have is on the 29th of July, and I don't think that's going to happen. I'm just hanging on to that for a guy that's coming in town, and maybe we can do something, but I don't see it happening. It's devastating. All the guides are, from good friends of mine, Brian, Jill, I'm in the fly fishing section. So we're the niche of the niche, saltwater fly fishing. So from, Brian, Jill to Nick Angelo to Marlon Marsh to all these guys, they're hurting real bad. And, you can't, like you said, you can't take a client out there and you're floating in dead fish and say, oh yeah, let's just start casting over there. It's not worth their money. It's not worth their time. It's not worth your time. Take up bass fishing or go north to Homosassa or the Big Bend area, stuff like that. As of right now, give our fish a break for the ones that are still around. That's how I feel about it. It's tough, man. It's real tough. It's a tough pill to swallow for, just seeing it with your own eyes and just you feel for them. Like you're not, you see it and I don't know. That's all I think I can say about it.
Yeah, Dustin, and as far as what you're seeing, because I was living on Davis Island back in, it was in 2017-18, whenever that big one was, a little while back. Mm-hmm. It really wasn't to get that far up. And so when you mentioned that you're seeing dead fish on Bayshore, that was just like a wow moment. It seems like this one is much more inland than a few years back.
For sure.
Are you seeing it all the way into Hillsborough River? Like how far up are you seeing?
No, well, yes and no. So right near Harbor Island Bridge in downtown, it's not so much to Hillsborough River, but I have a good friend, Tim Lauer, there, and he sent me a video of dead fish. Found a 5-foot hammerhead dead up there.
Like near Jackson's, like near the restaurant?
Right by the convention center.
Okay, yeah. Man.
Yeah, so and it's a hammerhead. That if anything is going to survive something, it's going to be a hammerhead. So found a 5-foot hammerhead. So yes, it goes all the way up there, not to maybe the extent it does through the mouth by Davis Island, but you go past Davis Island Yacht Club and you go south a little bit, bang, it's in your face. You go east to East Bay to the Alafaya. That's where we really started seeing the heavy concentrations weeks ago, was Bayshore and the Alafaya River mouth. And then you take the shipping channel down, and they were in the shipping channel. Everything. I was taking photos 3 or 4 weeks ago of dead cobia. I don't know if I've ever seen a dead cobia from red tide. Grouper, 40 to 50 inch snook, snapper. Endless mullet, endless catfish. And that was 4 weeks ago in the channel. But that river mouth and then down south to the shipping channel, and you keep going south, and that takes you to Piney Point. And that's where all this stuff has been. And I've never seen a red tide start in Tampa Bay. Red tides typically start offshore. Winds, currents, and stuff bring them inshore, whether there's a nutrient-rich outpouring from some other discharge somewhere else that's connecting the two. But red tide, from what I know of it, starts offshore and comes in. It does not start inside. A fish kill with a giant red tide does not start inside of Tampa Bay.
Right. And I think that, and again, we're not scientists here, so
yes, I'm not a scientist.
There's likely. So shut up, Dustin. No, just kidding. So, I think we can presume that at any given time, there's probably some level of red tide, the Crinia brevis organism, throughout our waters. Okay. It's probably there, in what concentrations, it just depends. And we only know what those concentrations are when testing is done, and FWC kind of leads the charge on that, as far as I know. And as you can see from their daily sampling maps, they'll test some areas, but not others. It's not like they're every place at once, right? And I think the key thing here is, while red tide is naturally occurring, what we're seeing right now is not natural. Okay, this is not natural, and it's really a common sense thing. Like, listen, there might be a little spark somewhere, but if you throw a gallon of gasoline on it, it's going to turn into a fire, right? And I think that's what we have going on here. There's red tide around, but it doesn't supercharge without that gasoline, right? And that gasoline is all the nutrients in the water that have been pumped in mercilessly over the past several months, right? So
and that's what Chris Whitman for Cabins for Clean Water said at our event the other day. He said forest fires are naturally occurring too. Once you start putting fuel on them, what does it create?
Absolutely. Yep. Right on.
That was one of the better ones I've heard. So
good analogy. Yep.
Justin, you've been quiet. I know you've got like a background in fisheries and management.
Yeah, my background's at UF in fisheries and aquatic science, and I'm
Go Gators.
Go Gators.
Go Gators, man. All right, cool. We're good.
Among friends.
When your passion is your profession, you can't help but take certain things personally. And I think I'm biting my tongue because having seen, water quality issues, I live in Orlando. So I grew up fishing Mosquito Lagoon a lot, and I saw a lot of similar nutrient supercharging issues in Indian River and Mosquito Lagoon. And then now to see it here and on a grandiose scale, I mean, Tampa Bay is a much bigger body of water. There's a much larger population density for that area. I think about, I worked with animals for a while. I worked in aquariums for many years and took care of sharks and stingrays and all kinds of game fish at the Gaylord Palms, at Disney for many years. And the one big thing that I remember is that nothing good happens fast in nature. Over time, you're talking about, nutrient or effluent discharge being put into Tampa Bay, and it's having effects over many, many, many years. And no discharge is great. I mean, we can clear that up, but in small amounts, it might go undetected, right? Because nature has a means of balancing itself out. But when you completely pile in, a 50-gram scoop of protein into an otherwise, self-regulating system of just an excessive amount, it's nitrogen and phosphorus is what you're saying. And nature can't keep up with managing any of that. It's an unnatural effect that's happening. Red tide may be a natural effect, but everything that we're doing to it is supercharging it. And it's painful to watch. It's really frustrating to know that that's where things are at. I'm hopeful and optimistic, as you guys are, that things will bounce back, but it's not going to bounce back if we don't do something about it. So I'm 100% behind supporting initiatives that you guys are behind and bringing awareness, taking action, letting everybody know that donating to support these initiatives are what people need to do. So if I'm quiet, I think I'm biting my tongue because I have really strong feelings about this.
Reminded me of a Jay and Silent Bob. Silent Bob stays quiet the entire movie, and at the very end, dude, that was great. Well said.
Yeah.
Silent Bob, Justin.
Does that make me the J because I can't keep my mouth shut on this whole thing? That's what happens when you give a lawyer a platform, man. I'm sorry.
So because I think everyone once again kind of wants a solution, and I've written down 4 things as we've been talking here. Number one, I'm with you, Dustin, is catch and release. I mean, Luke and I are big catch and release. The fish that we have caught really in the last 12 months are sheep's head, some triple tail, but I mean redfish, snook, trout, obviously for many reasons here in the bay. But I would encourage all of you. Obviously, can't tell you what to do, and I have a feeling FWC will probably shut it back down. I hope they do. But I would practice catch and release, and maybe just give it a break. Like Luke and I, we're going this weekend. We're going to Carabao, and then we're going to go to the Keys and just kind of change it up a little bit, and kind of stay away from the bay and just kind of give it a break. Number 2 is donate to you guys, and obviously we'll put links in everywhere. And I'm actually going to go read that. I actually do like reading, so Tampa Bay Water Keeper.org. Go to the legal cases, and I think. Because a lot of people get on social media, they just start spewing out stuff, and half of it's right, half of it's wrong. I mean, I trust me, if attorneys are getting involved, like you guys, and I know you guys have some environmental lawyers on there, that they're not going to waste their time and their words unless they can back it up. And so I'm really actually pumped to read that. So catch and release, donate, clean up. I think for all of you who have even contacted me today, that's a great way to do it. And it sounds like there's at least 4 or 5 big dump sites I saw that are all pretty big, very accessible ramps. And so we'll get all that to you as well. And then I think the final one we haven't really touched on is contacting representatives, right? Because to your point, we can be aware all we want as anglers. There's only so many of us, especially here in the state of Florida. But when the representatives and congressmen and senators and all the other people up there start hearing from millions of people and who are pissed off, like that gets stuff moving. Maybe not as fast as we want, but it gets things moving. So what are your thoughts there? Is there an easy way? Is there someone who's made like a template? I know Captains for Clean Water had one for a while where they made it just simple to contact all the right people.
Well, we certainly, and we're a relatively young organization, like Dustin touched on earlier. So we're kind of playing things as they lie right now, but that is one thing we're working towards to make it easier for people to have their voice. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that we're going to certainly focus on and having some kind of template. But before that happens, it's as easy as, listen, in our system of government, it is actually pretty easy to contact your local representatives. You figure out who the state rep is for your district, and they have a setup on their own website, I'm sure, for their district website to shoot them an email, or their email's available, and it's that easy, right? And now the question becomes, what's the subject line? What are you going to put in that email to your representative? What's the goal? What's the issue? Because you have to clearly define the issue that concerns you and tell them why it affects you and what you want out of it. So to focus on one particular issue, which we haven't talked about too much, which would be a whole other podcast, is the phosphogypsum stacks, the phosphate mining industry we have here in the state of Florida. And again, this is a caveat of this is my understanding, but one of the big problems with the phosphogypsum, which is the byproduct of phosphate mining, is that it's not identified or defined as a hazardous waste under federal law, which triggers certain things and certain obligations on the part of the entities that are creating this byproduct, phosphogypsum. And when we say gyp stacks, phosphogypsum stacks, that's the byproduct of the phosphate mining that ends up in these big stacks a la Piney Point, right? So that is one big issue, is that these entities, these phosphate mining companies, are allowed to create these massive stacks of waste that just sit on top of the land, and they can possibly leach into the groundwater. That's a possibility. And another possibility, not a possibility, but definite, is what happened at Piney Point, where you can have a breach in the liner and you can end up with a massive dumping or spilling or discharge, whatever you want to call it, into the estuary. So that is one big area where people can focus but become educated. There's a lot of materials out there. There's a lot of good YouTube videos providing some information on exactly what phosphate mining is and what it does and why it's a problem. And so that's one area where people can address their legislators to do something about it. So that's one area. The other area is more local counties and cities is demanding compliance with their sewage and their infrastructure, right? Whenever there's one of these spills, get loud. Send emails to your city commission, your county commission, like, what the heck? What's going on here? Why did this spill happen? We don't want this to happen anymore in our waters. So yes, you have a voice in our system of government. You can reach out to your representatives. We're the ones who put them in office. They work for us, right? So it's very important to make your voice heard. And again, a third way is to, again, support organizations like ours, because we're at the forefront of bringing these issues forward in court.
So if there's, because I think a lot of people want it simple too, right? So because I want to clarify that if we're going to contact, let's just say our local rep, right? What would you say? Like, is there a certain headline just to help people out? And obviously you actually are an attorney, but you're not giving legal advice here. So like, what kind of headline should they say? Because I feel like if everyone just kind of says their own stuff, that it could almost confuse people versus like having not a template. Maybe that's the answer, is having some just
right.
Well, sentences. What are your thoughts? Because we don't want to make an impact, right? We don't want to confuse,
right?
Confuse, you lose.
So I think the first step in that is becoming educated on the issues, right? Even if it's just a basic understanding of what the issues are and what issue concerns you, identifying those issues, learning about it, so you can speak intelligently in whatever letter or email you're sending to your representative. Okay. So if it's about sewage spills, like we just talked about, Google sewage spills, St. Petersburg, sewage spills, Bradenton, whatever the case may be, and learn about the history of it. Why does this happen? Is it because of excessive rainwater and the system becomes overwhelmed? Well, why is it becoming overwhelmed? Why don't they have the correct system? Okay. And so to make it super vanilla and easy, it's headline, I am concerned about our sewage. In the body of the email, I am concerned that there's continued sewage spills coming into our estuary from this city. I would like to know what this city is doing about it to make sure this doesn't happen again. I don't want to see this happen again. It's hurting our estuary. Please do something about it. Please call me and contact me and let me know what you're doing. It's that simple, right?
Draft it up, Surrey. Draft it up.
That's good, man.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But again, I think step one is like, listen, be educated. Because if you're just firing off pissed off emails, they're just going to get lost in the shuffle if you're not making any sense.
That was what I was getting at, because I've seen some of the people's comments. I'm like, man, if you're sending that kind of stuff to the rep, it's almost like it makes us look bad.
Yeah, don't put a voicemail on your representatives, or don't send a voicemail that you would reply to somebody on Instagram with or something like that.
And just an example of this, and I don't mean to be critical, because listen, we all see the same social media posts, but this just goes to the point of just knowing the issues and knowing what's what. I've seen a couple comments of, people being very angry about Piney Point, rightfully so, but, tagging Mayor Jane Castor of Tampa and blaming it on her. Well, Piney Point's in Manatee County, and City of Tampa has nothing to do with it, right? So just identify where the issue is, what the issue is, educate yourself, even if it's a baseline understanding, just enough to highlight the issue and ask the question, what are you doing to make this right? What are you doing to make things better? And one of the mantras that we have at our organization is preserve what we have, protect what we have, and improve what we have. And we're failing miserably as a whole, everybody, in doing that. And the first step is knowing it's a problem, identifying it, learning about it, and doing something about it. And I thank you guys so much for having us on, to giving us a voice, because it's huge to get the word out there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I do want to say this too before I don't mean to interrupt you, Joe.
Oh yeah.
Tampa Bay was, like we talked about before, was a dead zone in the 70s and the 80s, and it bounced back drastically. I think we were down to in the 50s, I think our numbers for seagrass acreage was 60,000 acres in the 50s. So that number dipped to either 20 to 25,000 acres in the 80s. They knew there was a problem. People got together, people formed whatever they needed to form in the 80s to change this. And it come around early 2000s and later in 2010, Tampa Bay was bouncing back. We were back almost to that 1950s numbers. I think we were around 55,000 acres of seagrass. So it can be done. I'm not saying that Tampa Bay is a complete loss yet. We don't know. I pray to God that it's not. But if we are on the brink, then we can definitely come back. And it just takes everybody to care, because they did back then, and we can do it again. And you know, we're a world-class fishery. We have everything here. You know, I mean, we don't have bonefish, but well, something we do a little bit. But we can do it again, and if we need to, and it just takes everybody to fight for it and to care. And yeah, I just wanted to say that a little bit because I love this place and I love this estuary. So I just don't want to see it die.
And can I just ask each of you guys a question real quick? And this might be a little cheesy, but I think it's important a lot of times to, with that whole mantra thing I was just talking about, preserve, protect, and improve what we have, right? Joe, what's your favorite fishing memory that comes to your mind right away in Tampa Bay? Right off the top of your head.
Oh, of course, you have to ask me first. My Bud Light mind. Man, that's a tough one, dude.
Pass?
Yeah, pass to Luke. Let me think.
Great live radio question.
I've got one. It was the coolest opportunity ever, but I caught a snook from a balcony over there in downtown Tampa.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing that video.
Yeah, so that was just like the perfect time situation, lucky cast, and fortunately the snook was eating. And yes, that was like something that'll never happen again. And it was just very fortunate that it all.
That was the one you caught from like a 3rd-story building or something?
Yeah, I was on a balcony. It was our office at the time, and it was solid. Joe saw it. I was like, man, I might be able to cast it there. And I had one rod rigged up, like it had to weed this bait because I made a couple bad casts and almost got stuck in a tree. Then yeah, it was just like one of those things that'll never happen again. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, mine was just there's not one specific one. I mean, but we started Salt Drum, and there was so much stress in our lives of quitting our old jobs and like not having a paycheck, and tell my wife we're not going to have a paycheck for a while. And just Luke and I lived on Harbor Island, Luke lived on Davis Island, and just fishing every day, trying to figure out everything. And it's like I just had so many good memories of fish with my brother who. You know, it's so cool to be able to run a business with a family member. And so for me, it was just those basically 2 years of trying to grow a brand new business, just like you guys are doing, right? I mean, you guys are still fairly young of just like, you know, just duking it out and having fun. And I was surprised at how beautiful everything was because I moved away for a little while. And then, I mean, Tampa looked amazing. That was 2015, 2016. I mean, Tampa looked great. I mean, the water quality was great. There's seagrass everywhere. And I mean, yeah, just the last couple of weeks going to see Luke in Sarasota, now that I'm in Winter Haven, it's just like, it's just disheartening. It really sucks.
This past winter, we had so many redfish, I mean, from the closures too. Like, yeah. Oh man, we had so many redfish in the bay. It was amazing. The water was clean. We were doing sight fishing. Clients were catching fish left and right. It was amazing. That was, I mean, a lot of that had to do with the closures too, I think, but it was in a good state. It was in a good place.
I got one, Adam. Now, Luke, the one that Luke caught from the balcony is obviously the best, but is the first time we bought a drone and we go out there on a little grass flat and we're in Luke's little Maverick and I'm just learning how to fly a drone. And I was like, man, how cool would this be if we could get a bite like on film with the drone right up there? And no lie, I mean, first liftoff, Luke freaking hooks into a redfish all on the drone. I'm like, this is freaking awesome.
And we had a camera on the boat with like I was mic'd up and I was doing a tip and I was trying to play it cool like this happens all the time. And so I was like talking to the camera and knowing the drones hovering around.
And you could see, I mean, I could see at least on my little screen all the potholes. I could see the whole thing, and they were just high-fiving. And we get done and realized it wasn't recording the entire time. Which just fired us up to go back there and do it again. So
how about you, Justin?
Man, I think about more so the places that I've been with other people, you know, like I remember fishing little feeder creeks. My wife got her first redfish in a little feeder creek off the Alafaya, fishing with Derek Burgos there, fishing with Jake Bates and Whedon Island, chasing schools of bullfish, 35 inches plus, fish that were moving away from all the boats that were around, like fish that hadn't been touched. I remember getting my first cobia. It was like 40 pounds off the tip of Bean Point tarpon fishing. I just, there's too many, man, but I think about all the people that I fish with in the different parts of Tampa Bay that I've been with them. And I hope I can go back and do all that again and recreate those memories of people.
Yeah. Well, I have three that really come to mind. The first one is, the first time I got my son, AJ, 7.5 now, so it must have been 1.5 years, 2 years ago now, I think. But I took him out on a charter with Captain Mike Goodwine, Blackneck Charters, man. Shout out to him.
We fished with him before. He's a blast.
Oh, man. And, he was awesome. And let me tell you something. The fish he put us on, and AJ was catching redfish after redfish after, and this is a little 5.5-year-old who's casting his own rod and reeling them in, setting the hook, all that stuff.
That's
very
awesome.
proud.
Yeah.
And he must have caught, I don't know, 25, 30 fish that day. It was insane. And that day, the majority of the fish we caught was right there, right out in front of Piney Point, right in that area. The second being, and this is right before everything really kicked off really bad. This was it was Mother's Day, because I remember my wife said, let's go out on the boat. I said, really? So we did. And so we sandbarred it up a little bit and then took the boys in to fish a little bit. And just threw a little chunk bait on the bottom over at Fort DeSoto. And my 4.5-year-old Henry was holding the rod. And all of a sudden I hear, daddy, 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 zzz, I got a fish, and ended up being a 37-incher. Wow. That he hooked and not reeled it in by him. So I say, hey, that's a real one. Give me the rod. He helped him out. And then the other one, my really good buddies from Bradenton that I grew up with, just fishing with those guys. We love wade fishing, live bait. I do a lot of fly fishing these days, but I still love live bait fishing. And just wade fishing that big outgoing negative tide where it bottoms out in the evening and just crushing it, just absolutely crushing it. So those are my best memories of fishing in Tampa Bay. And the reason why I asked you guys is, we're all smiling when we're saying these great memories, right? And it's so important that we don't sit back years from now and be like, oh, those were the good old days and we'll never see that again. We can, like Dustin said, the bay's resilient. Hopefully it'll come back. We don't know when, how long it's going to take for our fish to bounce back, but we can do it. We just have to push for it. We have to do the right things. We have to make the people that represent us to do the right things. So if we're going to keep smiling about these great memories and make new memories with our friends and our family and all that, we have to make our voices heard and we have to take action on it. So, at the risk of sounding cheesy, that's why I wanted to bring all that up to make that point.
Love it, man. That's good. That is good. All right. Anything else, Justin? Silent Bob?
I'm out. I'm speechless on that. We covered it all.
Luke?
Yeah, nothing. Yeah, I appreciate the details here. I'm going to go read. I've been very curious to learn more about the Piney Point. To be honest, I've heard just the high level stuff about it, and given the location of all these issues, it seems like it's a pretty logical conclusion that it was up there. So I look forward to reading that PDF on your site. So I appreciate y'all putting that together.
Awesome. And guys, again, thank you so much for having us on. We really appreciate it. Again, www.tampabaywaterkeeper.org. Become a member. We got a sweet logo with a tarpon on it. It's really cool. Cool. We got really awesome shirts and hats that come with membership. And so please join up as a member. There's various levels. Donate, do whatever you can. Every little bit helps.
Cool. We're all going to be signing up, and I've got an idea. I'm not going to say it yet because I want to run it by Luke, but I got an idea that we can do with our group to raise a few dinero, or awesome. many dinero. Yes, so TampaBayWaterKeeper.org. Guys, thank you so much. And are you guys having any more of these live events like you did there in Tampa? Anything coming up that you know of?
Yeah, and Dustin can speak to this a little bit more than I can because I had to jump off our board meeting a little early last night. But we are in the beginning stages of planning a rather large event, a rally of sorts, hopefully in the next 2 weeks. So keep an eye out on our Instagram page, which is just at Tampa Bay Water Keeper, and then Tampa Bay Water Keeper on Facebook for announcements on that. And we hope to have various events, symposiums, and more chats in the future. And one event, this is a ways off, but we did have a really successful fly fishing tournament, or inaugural tournament called the Waterman, that we had this past March, which raised about $18,000 for the organization, because we had an amazing raffle from all these great different companies. We raised a ton of money for the organization, which was really awesome. So keep an eye out for that. We're going to do that again in March. Hopefully the bays bounce back by then. It'll be late February, early March, but keep an eye out for that. Dustin?
Yeah, just what he said. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know when this is going to air, but we're hoping that we can do some kind of, we're still in the early stage. We just talked about this last night, and I think we're going to talk about it later today too, or later tonight. Maybe doing some kind of boat/land meetup somewhere in Tampa or St. Pete, wherever it's boat and walk friendly. Hopefully maybe not this weekend, but next weekend. I don't know yet, but cool. We're definitely working on something to get everybody together, because we need as much press and everybody talking about it as we can, because the more we talk about it, the more we push it, the more other people can't keep their heads turned away from it.
Yes, sir. Love it, guys. All right. Remember 4 things: catch and release, or just take a little break in the area, donate to our friends here at Tampa Bay Water Keeper, clean up if you can, and start contacting the correct representatives and sound somewhat intelligent. Halfway would be good. But it's so true. I mean, we got to get our facts straight, and we can't just be out there throwing mud everywhere, and unless we're pretty sure that we're throwing the right mud at the right people with the right message. So, guys, I really do appreciate you coming on here late at night. And everyone, please go over to their site, check it out, become a member, get some cool swag. And we'll stay in touch. Obviously, I'm going to contact you guys probably tomorrow or Monday, and with some ideas that I'm going to run by Luke. So stay tuned.
Thank you guys very much. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, guys. Peace. We out.
Thank you.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul.